So today's topic is cooperatively owned community solar. So in my primary job, we invest into some cooperatively owned community solar in Minnesota. So that was my first segue to this like solar community solar garden or all that. So I'm absolute like beginner in this space. So that's why I invited all these three experts in this Seattle local solar scene. So I think we can learn together more about like this community solar and co-op solar. So I will kick it over to Lower.
Hi. So for the sake of the video, should I use the mic? I'm much more comfortable without the mic. You mean the mic? Okay, cool. Hi, I'm Lowell. I am general manager for 9-0. We opened this space in September of last year. We've got a few hundred members across SF and Seattle, everyone who works on climate, so that's direct air capture, agriculture, thin film solar cell manufacturing, autonomous EV charging robots, you name it. A lot of founders, investors, policy people, scientists, engineers, and we do what we can to support people working in climate. We have space to gather for events like this and hackathons and podcast recordings and all that jazz. We have space to work. The whole floor is desks and meeting rooms and all that kind of jazz. We provide, we just built a lab access vehicle, so if there's hardware startups that are looking for capital and access to lab space, we help with that. We have a digital community with an AI tool that connects people based off interest, so if you have some sort of niche thing, you're like selling some new flame retardant for climate resilience and you need to talk to people who have that kind of expertise, you can like use our tool to find that. If you're interested in learning more and like kind of exploring how we can help you in your climate needs, if you need a job, you're hiring, you need capital, deal flow, anything like that, come talk to me afterwards. Cool. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much. And I gotta wait for my partner to come up, so to buy some time. Actually, the restaurant, the food we got it from the Monkey Bridge, and they gave us this $30 gift card. So now I will give you a quiz, and if you got it, I will give this to you. Because it's a food, so it's about like Vietnamese food. So I will read a description of food, and if you know what food it is, you can tell me the name. But Amy, you cannot participate because you are yeah. So I will read. A smoky and savory Vietnamese dish of grilled pork and noodles is a cultural icon of Hanoi and popular street food. The dish typically includes seasonal pork patties, caramelized pork belly, rice vermicelli, fresh herb, and tangy dipping sauce. Anybody have any no idea? Yeah, it's correct. Nah. Okay, now I will bring in Whitney. They are sponsoring this event, so.
Thank you, Mike. Thanks everyone for being here. I'm with Communities of Opportunity, or COO. For those who don't know, we are a public-private community initiative between King County, funded by the Best Starts for Kids Levy and the Seattle Foundation, and governed by a community board of leaders from across the county. We invest in things like this public learning series on cooperatives and cooperative ownership, because we believe in investing in something different, something that will bring us to a future of greater equity and well-being for all communities in King County. So with that, I will turn it back over to Mike and our panelists for today. Thanks everyone again for being here on a Tuesday.
It's not really fair that I won the gift certificate. I feel like somebody else should have. While they're doing that, I'll introduce myself. I'm Alex Porteshawver. Super nice to be here tonight. This is my second time here. Such a great space. I work at Seattle City Light. We are the municipal utility serving the city of Seattle and some other areas outside of the city limits. I have a slide that shows the map. I am part of our Customer Energy Solutions division. That is the, thank you. That's the division that is focused on delivering customer programs. So everything from designing to implementing, evaluating whether or not they were successful. We do a ton of community engagement and outreach to inform program design. And we also look towards the future and identify different ways of meeting our sort of broader utility goals related to renewable energy and community resilience and energy efficiency. Okay, so we get to spend a little time together. I'd love to get to know you more. Maybe that happens after the presentation. I want to share a little bit about Seattle City Light's Community Solar Program, which is currently in the design phase, so it's not yet available to customers. And then answer your questions and discuss your ideas, which sounds like we're doing it at the end of all the presentations. Okay, so who is Seattle City Light? Just in case folks aren't familiar, we are a municipal utility. We serve the city of Seattle, and also we serve franchise cities, which include Shoreline, Lake Forest Park, and then parts of Normandy Park, SeaTac, Renton, Tukwila, and unincorporated King County. We serve about 960,000 residents, and we have 490,000 metered customers. All right, so as I mentioned, I'm part of Customer Energy Solutions. We design and implement customer-facing programs, including renewable programs. Community solar is just one of those renewable offerings. And we talk with all sorts of folks as we're thinking about what programs to offer and how to offer them. Subject matter experts, customers, community members. We're trying to understand what's important and how we can best serve people. So what is community solar? Many of you probably know. It's any solar project within a geographic area. So in the case of City Light, within our service territory, that map that I just showed, in which the benefits, both environmental and financial, can flow to multiple customers. So you don't have to have solar on your roof, solar on your land to access the benefits. You can subscribe to a project and receive those benefits. So why does City Light care about community solar? We have several different sort of drivers that are pushing us towards developing a program. So our strategic plan, which guides the utility right now in 5-year increments, soon to be 10-year. We know we need more distributed energy resources, and we want to create opportunities for all customers to participate in solar, in battery storage, in transportation electrification. We also need to add a ton more customer solar generation, so way more than we have even in the last 5 or 10 years. So this is primarily due to building electrification and transportation electrification. So we need about 250 megawatts of customer solar by 2043. It's a ton. Just for point of reference, I'd say an average residential system in Seattle is about 8 kW. So we need a ton more of those systems. We need a lot more large solar systems. We need community solar. So we need to figure out creative ways to develop those projects both within our service territory and then also outside of our territory. Think utility scale solar, where we're bringing it across transmission lines and distributing it to customers. We are committed at CES to not only developing a clean energy future or opportunities for customers that can afford it, but we want to make sure that we are building resiliency and including all customers in the transition to clean energy. We also want to leverage the external funding that's currently available. So as of right now, the 30% federal investment tax credit is still available. And that is a big part of what makes these projects financially feasible to build. And then there's a state program that was developed through a piece of legislation 3 years ago. It's called the Washington State Community Solar Expansion Program. And House Bill 1814 set aside $100 million to support the development of community solar projects, 12 kW up to 199 kW, so not huge projects, that benefit low-income customers for at least 10 years. And City Light has every intention of leveraging both of those external funding sources to buy down the overall cost of the portfolio of projects we're wanting to build. Okay, so brief history. City Light did have a community solar program, what we call Community Solar 1.0. It was launched in 2011 and it exited our portfolio, meaning we no longer offered it to customers in 2020. We had 5 projects at 4 sites, and now all of those projects are owned by the site hosts. One of the projects is at the aquarium, for example. That project was relatively simple. It was a premium product, meaning we asked customers to pay extra. They bought a share. Each share was worth a certain amount of kW in each system. That share generated a certain amount of electricity, and they received credit, financial credit on their bill on an annual basis. The next iteration of the program, which is Community Solar 2.0, we're currently designing that program right now, and that is a little bit different. So we are looking at a mixed rate offering, meaning half of the new generation we develop will be for market rate customers or those that can afford to pay a little bit extra, and half of our new generation will be set aside for income eligible customers, and they'll get to participate at no cost, and they'll receive a guaranteed monthly bill credit. So the idea is reducing energy burden and increasing access to renewable energy for those that wouldn't otherwise have access. They can't afford it, they live in a multifamily building, their roof needs to be repaired, lots of reasons. And we're looking at targeting income eligible customers in the 0 to 80% area median income bracket, which aligns with other federal programs in terms of the income level for folks to access certain resources, financial and otherwise. And we also want to do targeted outreach to customers living near the projects we develop and give them sort of a first right of refusal. And we want to do targeted outreach to the lowest income customers, so the 0 to 30% AMI bucket, acknowledging that they have the most need. Okay, so this is where you guys get to chime in. Does community solar excite you? And I'm curious to hear what you think the benefits might be or what you perceive the benefits of community solar are.
Can we ask a few questions before?
Yeah, I think we're supposed to save the questions for the end, but maybe you could mix them in with your ideas.
State your question as a statement. So I work with a solar company here in town, and I know how much it costs, and the idea that you could divvy this up and make it more accessible to people at different financial stages, or like you can buy into it, like the idea of a community solar, like small investment, putting it towards that versus just essentially throwing away money. So that's what I like the idea of it. And the company I work with has done some of them. They did one up in Everett. Yeah.
That's great. Well, that excites me too about community solar.
Relatedly, I'm really excited that members are both the owners and the beneficiaries, which aligns incentives.
Yeah, we're actually still working through what happens with these projects. So ultimately, we're selecting sites in the community. We're identifying some sort of contractual agreement, whether that's a lease or a license agreement, to say, hey, we want to use your roof space for the life of the project, likely 20 years. And then what happens at the end of the 20 years. PSE, Puget Sound Energy, another utility in the area, also has a community solar program, and they sort of bake in options. So you can keep it, we'll transfer ownership to you, we can remove it entirely. We're thinking through what those different elements might be.
Yeah, I think one thing that's great about it is for all the properties that either due to lack of roof space or available space that can't receive solar are able to participate in a program like that by having solar offsite. And I'm curious if individual rental units can participate, and like if that is possible, then that is a way for them to participate if their property owner isn't pursuing that option.
Yes. Renters are a target audience for this program, so either market rate or income eligible. And market rate, there's sort of a different mechanism that we'll use to track generation of the system and allocate financial credits. And then there's a different way we'll do it for income eligible customers, offering that flat discount on their bill and signing them up.
I'm excited that it gets around the capital cost issue for homeowners. And also, I know that when I was considering it for my home, age of roof was a big deal. And so like you had to time it just right so that your roof was, not going to need to be replaced within the time that you could make back your investment. So I like that it's it's separated from the individual concerns of the homeowners.
That's great. I'm going to move on because I'm sure that I've already taken too much time. But I just, on that point, we are trying to work with community partners, community-based organizations, to identify enabling upgrades, what we call them, like, wow, I'd love to host a project, but my roof is old. The state funding, it covers 100% of the installed costs of a project. So there's possibility to wrap in some of those costs. There's another pot of money that will be available next year through the Department of Commerce. It's called Solar for All, and they have also built in the opportunity to include those enabling upgrades in project costs and reimbursements. Okay, so here are some of the benefits that we've been talking about. I've mentioned increased equitable access to renewable energy and an opportunity to reduce electricity bills, which I heard from some of you. It's super important for our low-income customers to have access to financial assistance programs. Paying utility bills is a big deal. So we are hoping to dual enroll them in many programs, enroll them in at least 2 programs and several others. So we have a utility discount program that offers a 60% discount, and we'd be looking to layer this discount on top of that, trying to almost zero out their electricity bill. We want to and need to build new local renewable generation. So we are working with one of the national labs to identify where we can build these projects considering existing and forecasted electricity use. And that leads to more reliable power. It leads to less costs invested in infrastructure upgrades. And it also allows us an opportunity to pair that generation with battery storage to increase community resilience when power goes out. Okay, so I mentioned that we want to talk with customers to inform program design. So the utility shouldn't be doing this on our own. We shouldn't be talking internally and deciding what's best and then offering it to customers. So we're trying several different avenues to engage customers early and often so that not only do they have a say, but they feel empowered to make decisions about the program. It's hard. We're trying lots of different things. And the reality is that people will feel left out. Some decisions will be made that people don't agree with. We are trying to be transparent and trying to offer regular updates and be accountable to the process that we've committed to. So we've partnered with another city department. It's called the Department of Neighborhoods, and they have a community liaison program. So these are folks that are existing community leaders. They have amazing relationships with community groups, with individuals, with organizations, and we're looking to them to help us identify events we should be going to, relationships with specific organizations we should be building. We've also conducted some focus groups with market rate customers. So we want to know, how much extra would you pay? And do you care that these projects will offer benefits to low-income customers that wouldn't otherwise have access? We've also had a ton of conversations with potential site hosts. So we have a running list of people that might be interested in hosting these projects. We also are going to do an open call for projects this year. So the community will get to tell us where they'd like to see the projects, probably in a couple of months. Sort of a fun activity. We did the same thing with our public electric vehicle charging station program, looking for sites. We've had some engagement with solar contractors, so the utility has relationships with our trade allies as well. So I've talked with some contractors, just letting them know, what the program is and what we're thinking. We've talked about workforce development opportunities. We've talked about priority hire. We've talked about King County's Jumpstart program, which offers women and people of color training hours, more in the residential area for solar energy, but just investigating all the different options, and look forward to more engagement with contractors. Would love to talk after. We've been doing a ton of work around urban, native, tribal learning and engagement. So there are no federally recognized tribes in our service territory, but there are urban native populations living here, and there are native-led organizations in our service territory. So working with the CL Gabriel, who's on the right, to Community Liaison Gabriel, to identify those organizations, to just go and be in community, to learn more about what's happening for Native folks. We also plan to do capital C consultation with the tribes as well, informing them of what we're doing. Okay, so you've talked about some of these too, and I asked about benefits, but what we've heard so far is that the financial benefit is a big one. So market rate customers want to know when they'll make their money back. Income eligible customers want to know how much they'll save. the increased access to renewable energy, and specifically for everybody, more so for income qualified customers, and the point about, hey, you could participate and own a project. So we've heard from low income customers, we want to see these projects. We want to feel connected to them. We want them to be on significant community spaces and buildings. Resiliency against power outages if paired with battery storage. So we're partnering with another city department, the Office of Sustainability and the Environment, to understand where community resilience hubs might be planned, and theoretically we could also site community solar project there. Layering again with other affordability or energy efficiency programs, and then setting clear workforce development goals. The utility is going to spend a ton of money to build these projects, and so we want to make sure it's directed in a way that are offering folks in priority zip codes that don't tend to have opportunities to develop skills in renewable energy to have access to those opportunities. Okay, so some of the design elements: build 4 megawatts by 2028. The largest project in our service territory is just over a megawatt, so this is a significant amount of renewable energy for the utility. We want to leverage that external funding I talked about at the beginning. We want to offer no cost participation and a build credit for income eligible customers. I talked about workforce development and art. So we have a 1% for the arts program, and we're wanting to combine these project sites with public art, again, to honor these community spaces and increase awareness of renewable energy. Timeline, we're in the design phase. We started last year, it'll go through this year. We are going to start thinking about project siting this year, early next year. We hope to start project construction next year, which will take several years. And then customer enrollment won't happen until the projects are completed. And then customer community outreach is happening throughout. Okay, so there's a ton of opportunities for collaboration. I love coming to things like this and talking, and hope to identify more of those. I'm trying to go back to the same groups over and over again to offer regular updates. And then relationship building. So I'm looking forward to getting to know all of you more and making more relationships with our customers. And I want to hear your ideas for program design and everything from launching the program and implementing it. I'm almost done. Okay, so I guess I'll save this for the end, but just keep in mind I want to hear questions. What do you think we're missing? And also curious about how you all want to be engaged moving forward. Thank you.
So next up is Amy.
Thank you. Oh my God, how do you use this thing? Hello, I'll start by introducing myself. My name is Amy. I use she, her pronouns, and sometimes I forget this part of the presentation where I just jump right in because I'm so excited, and people are like, where did this girl come from, and who does she represent, and what does she do? Right now I'm not currently representing anyone. This is just what I've gathered from my experience from Spark Northwest, which is where I've interacted with some of you. I've moved on from that position. I was building programs that we're encouraging group purchase. So that's another strategy in a type of community-driven solar. I now work at Restaurant to Garden, which is a Chinatown International District-based composting operation, so organics management on a much smaller scale. And I most recently rolled off of the board of the People's Solar Energy Fund. So I'm going to provide some examples of the members' projects there. So that's kind of how I got put into this sticky situation by Mike. He always gives me about 10 to 15 minutes to shrink down what I would like to talk about. And I would like to start all the way back in the 1900s. So reimagining energy for our communities. I heard a lot of excitement for solar, but I'm not quite seeing it. So I'm going to try to bring it out of you just now. So the People's Solar Energy Fund is a nationally organized group. They're member-directed, but they're a nonprofit. So even though we have cooperative principles and values, we are a 501c3. So PSEF exists to support members with products and services that advance community accountable models of clean energy projects. That language is always like hyper-specific because ownership is not always possible in all of the policy environments and economic environments across the country. And lastly, PSEF is governed by a board, which I was a part of, and I told them to maybe ask me next year if I had the time, so I'm just kicking that can further down the road. But if any of you are interested, that is an opportunity for you as well. So that governance structure ensures accountability to our target communities. And what that refers to is the environmental justice idea that we actually can replicate the harms of our existing systems through the renewable energy transition if we're not careful. So I will talk a little bit about that today, but again, spending hours and hours on just the few minutes we have together now. So I'm gonna give you a speedy history of energy utilities, and I wrote it down so I didn't get off track. I've got about 8 to 10 bullet points. So, to get energy in your home or wherever, the electricity needs to be generated, transmitted, and then distributed to you. And this is, again, going back to the 1900s. So, to finance this rapid expansion, companies turn to wealthy investors or shareholders to create investor-owned utilities. So, they provide energy to customers for profit. That's their main goal so that they can pay back their investors. And this started generally in larger cities because that's where you could see like a greater return on that investment. There were also municipal or public utilities, much like Seattle City Light, that was founded in 1902. I guess you can look that up. So municipal utilities don't generate profit for private investors, but the net revenue is, at least in theory, supposed to be reinvested into that utility or spread the benefit among people on the local level. So this business can be very profitable, and without regulation, people were like climbing all over each other to get in on the piece of the pie. So they put power lines and plants everywhere. So if you've ever been to Houston, that's what our society could look like without regulation. No hate to Houston. But the mess of power distribution can be, ugly, just non-aesthetic, and it can be hazardous because it creates fire hazards. And we decided to build cities out of wood back then. So they decided on this idea of natural monopolies. So given the high fixed costs of building plants and power grids, it just made more sense for one entity to do all of it for a geographic area. That kind of makes sense. It's kind of like the divide and succeed strategy. But this means that all of the utilities saw the opportunity to be the sole provider in that area. So thus began this tug of war between all of the different types of utilities and the different interests that they had. Ultimately, we know that investor-owned utilities won this war. They fought to become regulated monopolies, basically saying that if we get to be the chosen ones, we'll let you tell us how to do it and give us the rules. So this is pretty unusual, capitalists letting government dictate what they should do. But, you lose that battle and you win the war on being the monopoly of particular areas. So it also reflects the electric industry being successful in getting state and federal governments to prioritize and say that private interests and profit are essential to this system. So this kind of relates to an institutional framework that I'll be referencing throughout this chat. However, public utilities are also regulated by public utility commissions. The one in Washington here is called the Utilities and Transportation Commission. So they are not without flaws, despite that. Sorry, Seattle City Light. So regulatory bodies, even PUCs, are committed to protecting the utility business model and ensuring the profitability of those utilities, which typically is the antithesis of what people's needs are, and especially those that are most marginalized in our communities. And despite being customer regulated, even Alex touched on this, there's really low engagement or low energy democracy. We don't even vote for the people who run Seattle City Light. They're appointed by our mayor. So that's not inherently problematic. I think that it just sets the stage for where this movement's coming from and why there's a lot of people who are actually struggling in this fight. Because sometimes when I talk about it, people are like, these ideas are so good, so obvious, everyone should do it. We actually have really big enemies in this space. All right, so talking the talk, I just wanted to share some key terms that are often used. Community ownership, like I mentioned before, sometimes they use other terms like community accountable, community driven. Again, not inherently bad to not use the word ownership, but something that I personally really strive for is ownership. Community solar gets confused a lot, especially by our politicians. They basically think anything that's community benefited through solar is community solar, but community solar has a very specific definition that Alex provided earlier. It's an array that has multiple users or customers. Energy democracy versus ownership. Again, democracy is that idea that you participate, that you have your voice heard, and then ownership is having that on top of the power being related to your ownership. And then again, sovereignty and independence. This is kind of mincing words at this point, but I think that it's relevant because in the diverse groups that are pursuing these solutions, I think independence gets confused for people wanting to go off grid. And I think independence often refers to them wanting to be able to make their own choices, which is sovereignty. Okay, so the fight to take back the utilities. We've actually been trying for a really long time. It's going okay. But there's different models of community ownership. So the first that Alex talked about was community solar. Sometimes you'll hear it called shared solar. There are power purchase agreements and also group purchase campaigns, which I had mentioned just now. And the reason why you would pursue any of these is based on the political and economic environment that you work in. So there's two key components that can help you distinguish the qualities of these models. You've got who's generating the power and who's using the power. I had someone in one of these previous talks ask me like, why can't it all be the same? And why can't I get my energy from like Arizona? It's actually like kind of a good question. I don't know. Like why when you buy a pair of shoes online, does it come from the warehouse down the street instead of the one in Virginia? You know, I think it's about the utilities that have set themselves up in their service areas. And even though our grid is interconnected, it's maybe not as interconnected as it could be. And when it is, we become more resilient. So anyways, the traditional monopoly system that I just described in that brief history, the utility is generating the power, which means they also have the ownership. And then the people who are using the power are multiple users, residents, this co-working space, hospitals, schools. Community solar is generally one large array that is generating the power, and it can be the utility, like Seattle City Light, or it can actually be a group of people like us. So all of us could go find a place, whether it's like the roof of that building, or if we had a farm, we could put a big array there and all of us could own that, and then we could also sell it to a bunch of other people. So that'd be cool. A power purchase agreement is where you have solar somewhere, and then you sell that solar to multiple small users or one large user. And the reason why it's different than community solar is that usually the people who generate it and use it are not the same. Whereas in the community solar aspect, that group of people generally is the user, if it is a group of people. And then for group purchase, it refers to lots of people, generally a neighborhood, all getting solar on their own home. And it's really more just everyone holding hands and crossing the finish line. And the program makes it easier for all of them to do that. But it's really aggregating the process of one person buying solar for themselves. You can ask questions later. This was like very brief. So benefits and challenges, and these are quite superficial. There's obviously a lot more challenges or even more benefits that you can imagine. So the benefits of the traditional monopoly are that we don't have to challenge the status quo. I think that's really easy to do in all matters of justice. We don't have to question why black people live more in Tacoma than they do in Seattle. We don't have to ask why people in CID actually get attacked more than people in Ballard. And it just makes it easier for us to move on with our lives. But when we start to challenge the status quo, we realize that they're freaking ripping us off. And how do they do that? Well, you don't always see it, based on where you live, actually. But maybe you live next to where they generate power from a coal-fired plant. I moved here from Iowa. They have 2 coal-fired plants there. And the health risks of living in those cities is really tragic. And in Seattle, we're actually quite lucky that our electric mix is really resilient and therefore cheap through hydropower. But let's say you had the privilege of living in Hawaii, you would also have the privilege of paying like 5 times as much for your electricity. Okay, for community solar, as someone asked earlier, you do not need your own site to do that. So renters are a key target audience for those enrolling in community solar. And like you said, even though you have your own roof, because it's not suitable for your own solar, you would use a different site rather than your own home. However, you do need virtual net metering, and that can be limited in Washington. And the more advanced virtual net metering policies in this country are where you see the better community solar projects. For the power purchase agreement, you do not need your own site or virtual net metering because you're selling the energy to someone else to use. But the economic model of the power purchase agreement is that you need to have money to invest to become the utility, basically. Again, quite superficial. We can kind of go into that more. And then for group purchase, you don't need virtual net metering because it's just your own meter at home. And then you do need your own site, and you do have to have the wealth to invest in that site. Okay, so there are some major problems. Those were the maybe like superficial problems. These are the major problems. How will we build the solar? Where are we gonna put it? How will we pay for the project? And as a subset of that, when will we pay for the project? So the solutions for that are policy advocacy, technical assistance. It's actually pretty burdensome of a solution, but that's what we need. For where we'll put the solar, we need some creative siting and partnerships. In Seattle, you can't really build out. You've got the mountains, you've got water. We're trying to build up, but that doesn't necessarily work for solar. So you have to get really creative with that. How to pay for the project, Alex already gave an example of this. There's like the tax credit, solar for all, which actually funds are frozen. So that's kind of scary. And you could also put in your own cash, you can take out a loan, all the other ways that you can find money between the couch cushions. But PSEF, the organization I'm a part of, wants to add more options to that mix. And then when you pay for the project is really important because then you need financing. Financing is all about having money now and actually not being able to pay it back until later. And as we know, there's the depths of the iceberg about how inaccessible financing is for certain communities. So there's another layer of challenge to that. But we can still wield it as a tool to our benefit. So the People Solar Energy Fund, what do? They have shared commons. I think that reflects the cooperative principles that I had mentioned earlier. So across its membership, they do a lot of sharing, and that's not just about the knowledge that they have, it's about practical tools. So in Minnesota, which I'll call Mike up here to describe that project a little bit, they were able to have, since they're relatively more advanced in the community solar development space, they have the software that does virtual net metering and enrolls and bills their clients. And so that's one asset that they can share with the entire membership. There are other members in the space that have the skill set and capacity to be really great policy advocates and lobbyists. One of the coolest guys I met said that he used to do security for music festivals, and he had to kick people out when they were being bad. And so he always had to tell them what to do, but make it sound like it was their idea. He's the best lobbyist. There's a long-term capital support through the revolving loan fund. They just stood that up recently. So it's meant to generate funds for the organization itself. With grants, you're gifting money and you don't expect it back. With a loan fund, you make money on the interest that's accrued and then the money is paid back. Pre-development loans, that just refers to the fact that some projects are not like ready to be built right away, and so that money helps you get to that point. Bridge financing, that specifically refers to the tax credit not being accessible until tax season. So if you need that 30% to make your project go through, and then you'll be able to pay it back when you get that refund, then that's what the bridge financing is for. And then grants, but on like a very small scale. So this is the project that I had mentioned that Mike worked on through Shared Capital. Who's ever been to Minneapolis? Okay, awesome, cool. Maybe you saw a show at Target Center there. So this is the parking garage for Target Center. It is publicly owned, so they actually had to contact the state and the city for access to it because you can see that it goes above a highway. So the parking structure is city, the highway access is state. So they actually had to ask 2 landlords to get access to that site. And then they built, I don't know how many megawatts, a lot, on top of that roof there, and they have lots of subscribers. Like I mentioned, they're relatively further advanced in the community solar development world just because they have a really favorable policy environment, but they also created that environment for themselves. So I think it's good to remind ourselves that we don't really like luck into these enabling criteria. We can also drive them forward and kind of have like a really shared approach to it. Okay, this project is not existing yet, I don't believe, but another PSEF member, Sage Development Authority, based out of South Dakota, is wanting to create a power purchase agreement at Standing Rock. And what they're thinking of doing is building their own solar on their land and then selling that energy back to the utility. So the utility pays them for the product that they're creating, and the profit they generate from that goes back to the member owners or the tribe. And then lastly, if I'm being truthful, group purchase is probably the weakest type of ownership model that there is here because it perpetuates individual ownership of solar. Again, not inherently bad, but when we think about all of the shared benefits that we can have, these don't necessarily support those. But I worked on this project in Portland, Oregon when I was working at Spark Northwest. There's a land trust there. So if you're familiar with the land trust model, all of those homes are already permanently affordable. So that was kind of our way of getting equity into the door with the group purchase program. And we used funds from the Portland Clean Energy Fund, which is a grant, to pay for the solar arrays that went into this group purchase. But the main feature of a group purchase is that we got 10 to 20 people to buy solar, so we asked the installer for like a little bit of a discount. So that's kind of the pro of doing a group purchase versus just like encouraging people in any area to buy solar. You kind of get them into this like campaign mode. So that's me and the group of board members and members of Portland Solar Energy Fund. Really good group. They're actually kind of crazy. It's kind of weird to think that I'm one of them because I'm like, am I crazy? But really wonderful folks. If your organization is interested in joining the People Solar Energy Fund, you can find that on the website. And as far as like some of the historical information that I presented, it's not a conspiracy theory, it's actually like really accessible. And you can find it compiled at the Energy Democracy Project, which is a project of crystals. So I will leave the questions until the end. Okay.
Okay, next up is Adam, our last presenter.
Thank you. The clicker? Yeah.
Sorry.
Well, hi everybody. My name is Adam Powers. That is my last name, and I work in the energy field. Let me make sure I know how that works. Okay. My presentation's a little different. I'm going to be talking about a cooperative that I started with a couple of individuals, and we actually just had one of our whiteboarding sessions right here. But I do a couple of different things, so we're going to see the whole gambit of it. But the initiative that we're working on is a solar initiative. We're calling it Second Life Solar, where we're capturing decommissioned solar panels being taken off of sites, and we're giving them a second life by pairing them with batteries to create solar microgrids and then putting them on agricultural land to give the land an opportunity to not just generate food, but energy as well. As I said, my name is Adam Powers. I do a couple of different things. I run a for-profit called DC Power Plants, which puts down solar microgrids to support on and off-grid residential and commercial buildings. I'm also a board member of Olympia Community Solar and a member of BOSS, Black Owners of Solar Services, and we started the Circular Economy Co-op, which I forgot to put on here. But we have done, as a collective, mainly around the DC power plants, we put down solar agrivoltaic systems that open and close with the weather out in California. We've done urban garden projects. We put down a solar microgrid in an urban garden to power events. And we also worked on putting down a solar system to power a tiny house village made out of shipping containers. So I got to introduce solar microgrid. So I'm outlining it. Solar panels plus batteries equals solar microgrid. Simple. And if you put a solar system on your roof and add a battery, you've turned your home into a solar microgrid. It's its own distributed energy resource, helping to push energy to loads, whether that's your vehicles or an HVAC system or to the grid. But this is an example of a solar microgrid. And what we're doing with Second Life Solar is we're lowering the capital cost. Because if you're putting solar on your roof, we know that has a cost if you're going to add a battery. And if you don't already have it connected to the grid, that's going to have a huge cost. So we're lowering that capital cost almost by 50%. We also work with non-permitted solar racking systems. So we can put down a solar system in a day and pick it up in a day. Or we could put it down and fill it full of gravel, which you should, and it can hold up to a Class 3 hurricane. So what that means is we can put down systems very easily. But part of this is not just about putting down the system, it's about where the energy comes from, where it was generated, where those solar panels come from, and how we create a circular economy. Because we're all familiar with probably the first life of solar, where it gets made in a factory out of raw materials, then gets put onto a house, might sit there for 10 to 15 years, and then sometimes it gets taken off because they're new panels, and they're not old, they're getting thrown away. And we're recapturing that, giving it a second life, bringing it to agricultural land, and having it used for everything from agrivoltaics to greenhouses, and making sure that at the end of its life, it's ending up in a recycle facility where they're breaking it down, turning it back into raw materials that could end up being new panels and starting the cycle all over again. Simply, what we're offering as a business is solar microgrids as a service. We put it down as a package, and now it can be microgrids that just cover a well, or microgrids that cover a farming operation, or backup power, or for a full event. This is a project I'm currently working and presenting to you guys before I get to present to the client. They have a beautiful 70-acre piece of land, and they want to energize audio video studio, have a little bit of agrivoltaics system to power the well, and a greenhouse as well. And each one of them is its own little solar microgrid. And this is our visualization of the project. It's going to power, the main system's going to power a small 3-room barn that they're going to turn into a music studio. And we've done this before. In fact, we host an event every year called the Burien Solar Punk Festival, where we put down one of the solar microgrids and we show people what we can do with our own power. We host a music festival. We host Green Job Expo. We host a movie in the park. And all of this is powered off the renewable energy system to show our community this is what you can do with your own power. And this is not one business, as you can tell. This is a conglomerate of businesses, a circular economy of different businesses. Everybody from LED Trail, which does actual solar manufacturing in Portland, to Sphere Solar Energy, who puts down the solar system like the one at the garden, to Omnidian, which helps to monitor systems, to Electra, which helps to get acquisition solar panels that are being decommissioned, to the workforce training that I do with the nonprofit, to DC power plants, putting these solar microgrids down, all the way to the end where we have manufacturers and recycling organizations that will break it down and recycle those solar panels. And I always have an ask or call to action, come see it. We have an event coming up. So you can just come and see the solar microgrids and how we use it. One of the other options we're getting ready is our crowdfunder, where you can buy a solar panel or help pay for it to be decommissioned brought to the land to be used for this second life purpose. And one of the key things that's going to happen on the Sacred Land Collective is they have an air balloon company that actually lifts off and drops down on that land. So when we have it set up, you can actually ride up on the air balloon and see your investment. See what the solar panels are doing and the energy that's flowing through the land to generate not just electricity, but food, as well as water, and also plastic, because we're going to turn plastic into fuel. So that's my presentation. Hopefully those QR codes work, because I've been working on that and have a lot more to present, but I wanted to keep it kind of simple.
You can stay there. Alex and Amy.
Oh, it does? Okay. I was stressing about that.
Now we're gonna have Q&A. I will give you. If you have a question, I will give you a microphone. Oh, okay.
I had two questions. One, I was wondering if any of you knew what the capacity factor is for the community solar programs in Seattle, in this area. And then two, I had a question about the subsidy for utility to cover the cost, and how the first speaker mentioned that you're trying to get it down to fully subsidize utility costs. Is the subsidy you're looking for the entire length of the project, or what's the limits on those subsidies?
These are good questions. Our capacity factor changes every time we update our demand side management potential assessment, which is a planning exercise to understand what is our projected load, what are our generation assets, and what else can we utilize to meet our energy efficiency goals and our renewable energy goals. So I can't tell you what the capacity factor is off the top of my head. Happy to follow up with you afterwards. In terms of the subsidy, working through that. So part of this program involves updating our Seattle Municipal Code to give us authority. So currently the code offers us authority for the first iteration of the program, so we'll need to update it. Part of that update is giving us the authority to design a rate for market rate customers. So we're thinking about how long will that rate be good for. The utility needs flexibility, and yet we want to offer customers certainty when it comes to what their financial investment will get them. On the income eligible side, we're trying to offer as much flexibility as possible. So join the program, get the bill discount, stay however long you want, or leave, because we get people's plans changed, they move out of our territory. We're also thinking about keeping participation with the customer, in the sense that if they move within our service territory, they're still enrolled and they don't have to re-enroll just because they switch buildings.
Hi, thanks so much for your presentation. I was wondering I wanted to hear about the project with water, because I'm really concerned with water consumption, especially since every single time everyone uses AI, the machines are using the water to cool down the machines. So I wanted to hear about your project with water and maybe a vision, because I feel like I'd like to see the city and the state actually think about how are they going to use water more efficiently, and what's the actual vision for that. Thanks.
Yes. So number one, I always want to give a shout out to a gentleman named Moses West from the Moses West Foundation. He has created a large-scale air-to-water generator that generates 2,000 liters of water a day. It's made out of a shipping container. He put one down in Flint, Michigan, and he put one down everywhere that he can. Air-to-water generation is a technology where it takes the humidity out the air and it creates water, drinking water, through filtering it through osmosis, UV lights, and charcoal filter, making a WHO, World Health Organization definition of clean, drinkable, potable water. So, but that technology is not new. In fact, you can buy it now. But also, all of our HVAC systems create water. We just don't cycle it and use it within the system. So One thing that we plan to do is buy one of Moses West's systems, put it down on the farm that's being powered by agrivoltaics and generating the water that actually runs into and utilize it for the operation and potentially the house. And then, yeah, so that's how water will be utilized.
Thanks to each of you again for your presentations. I was going to ask, is it Amy? Middle. What caught my attention was you talking about virtual net metering, and I was wondering for co-ops and condos, as a practical thing, I've been a homeowner before where we got just as a single family standalone home, solar panels. I've looked around and a lot of people don't even want to deal with condos or co-ops, and so what's the virtual part? And I just thought it was going to be direct.
Yeah.
What are our options these days?
That is a great question because I did not define what virtual net metering is. Yes. So you have a meter at your wherever you're using your energy, and it tells Seattle City Light how much energy you're using. If you have solar at that location and you end up exporting energy to the grid, the meter records that. And a net meter refers to what you use versus what you send. A virtual net meter is where that meter is abstract and not physically at your site. So if I were to put a huge array at this farm and they sold some of that energy to me, they would have to have a way of knowing how much I used. And so they would calculate that virtually. That's what that means. So the opportunities for it are that you can have the solar exist anywhere and have it calculated for how much you use and how much of it is being used on other things like the other water, diesel, the utility, whatever it is. It's the location-based calculation of where the energy is going. Yes.
So City Light doesn't currently offer virtual net energy metering, but we're developing it, and we are looking to pilot it with a couple of different multifamily buildings in the next probably half year to a year. Community Solar will leverage that for our market rate customers. So just like if you were a net energy metering customer, if you had solar on your own roof and that meter was measuring generation versus use, you would see the credits fluctuate month by month. And then at the end of a year, we call a true up where we, right now, according to state law, wipe the credits at the end of the year. If there are any, oftentimes there are not, and then start again in the new year. On the income eligible side, we won't need virtual net energy metering. So just like in California, we'll offer a flat bill discount, which is very easy to see and guaranteed. So low income customers know exactly what they're going to get each month and can count on it.
This is a little bit for Alex and a little bit for all of you, but I'm wondering, yeah, specifically what some of the opportunities might be like for rural sites, like this farm, to install solar and sell it, use it on site, and also have enough or be able to participate in this kind of program. You mentioned stuff that's further out from your service area and how it would tie into your grid and that sort of thing. Just curious about rural opportunities.
I'll start and happy to offer this to others. So City Light has several renewable program options. You can be a net energy metering customer if your system is up to 100 kW. If your system is above 100 kW, you're considered a large renewable customer, and we offer a different rate for it. For the community solar, rural. We don't have very many rural areas in our service territory, and we're looking at all sorts of different spaces. So there could be open areas that are brownfield areas. We don't want to disturb natural areas, but that we might place systems on. So we're sort of open and we're investigating what all the different options are. But outside of our service territory, it doesn't work. And also we want it to be on our distribution grid, not on our transmission grid. So that would be far away outside of our service territory and much bigger projects. The distribution grid are the wires you see connecting from the poles to your house. Local is the key.
I think for me, that's kind of the bread and butter, is that focusing on that area that's outside of utility support, I will use the term, as there's just not a lot of support for those who need it. For example, that land, when the power went out, power cycle, it was out in my house maybe for a day, a couple of hours. For them, it was 5, and they have a well. So that means the power's out, the water's out, the plants aren't getting everything. It's not. So that's where we're talking to them about creating their own independent IPP, independent power production system that they can rely on. I think that's the best way I can answer that.
I'm going to take this opportunity to bring up another point, vaguely related to that. So we know that rural communities are at the end of all types of service lines, not just energy, but also medical, educational, all sorts of different things, sewage even. So they maybe typically racially do not make up a minority, but they are certainly marginalized in the creation of like a centralized utility system. And one thing out of the utility playbook, which is actually a list of strategies that utilities use to make it harder for us to own our energy, not Alex personally, is that they want to change the rate that you can get for exporting your energy. So the reason why I thought of this is because I was recently at kind of a rural place outside of Bay Area, and they were thinking about arbitrage, which is another strategy for us, which is to export the energy when the cost is high, when demand is high, and then using the energy at night and putting it into our batteries when it's cheap. The thing that I mentioned earlier about the utilities wanting to change the rates of the electricity that they pay for is that they make this argument that because we're using the same transmission lines and distribution lines, which, yeah, true, is that you shouldn't be getting the retail cost of your energy per kilowatt hour. You should be getting the wholesale rate. So instead of the 9-ish cents that we pay for the energy coming into our homes, whatever we export is actually what it takes for Seattle City Light, Puget Sound Energy, or whoever to produce and generate it, which is much lower. So it completely de-incentivizes us exporting energy to the grid. So thank you for giving me the chance to hop on that soapbox.
Hey, this might not be a question that's maybe applicable to each of your works, but something that I've been thinking about after hearing about Georgia Power's reforecasting on the amount of megawatts they need as a result of the increase in data centers and AI being used, and just how worrisome that is to me, and the lack of education around using AI and the amount of energy it consumes, going back to the water point as well. And I was curious if maybe Seattle City Light, or are there energy efficiency programs or awareness projects that are, or holding companies accountable that are now all of a sudden demanding a much higher use?
All the hard questions. No, kidding. Where to start? We have a rate making process. So, we go through a series of different planning activities to understand what rates should be, right? It's different in Washington than it is in California. And we are identifying the upgrades we need to make. We are identifying the cost of serving our customers. We're identifying the cost of providing reliable electricity. So that's a very public process that goes before our city council. So there's an opportunity for the public to be involved there to say, hey, what about these big data centers? What are you doing about that? The costs of providing electricity shouldn't be borne by all customers. I invite you to participate in that. I think too that City Light is in the process of better understanding where electrification and increased demand will happen. We know some, and we're still figuring out the rest. And the other part is, yes, there are efficiency programs and demand response programs that are targeted at a variety of customers, including our largest customers. And so we have many different outreach efforts to reach out to those customers. We have what we call key account managers. They have the big high energy users. They're always talking to them about how they can reduce their electricity use and what incentives we can offer, helping them understand about certain local and state regulations they have to comply with. So that's happening. But, we need to be doing more. We are doing more. It's sort of like understanding, planning, executing, and yeah, there are opportunities, I think, for everyone here and others to get engaged in that.
Something that actually was a recent win for the little guys is that the 30% tax credit that is available used to only, it used to only be non-refundable, which means that it'll decrease or eliminate your tax liability, but for anything more than what you owed, they wouldn't cut you a check for it. So if you're someone like a nonprofit who doesn't generate a lot of tax liability, or a church, then you wouldn't be able to take advantage of that tax credit. There was a way around that called tax equity partnerships, where you would find someone who does have that tax liability, typically really large generators and companies, and they would own the project to be able to access that credit and then sell you the project down the line, you know, if they were feeling like gracious. But because we now have direct pay, which is an option for the IRS to just give you that money directly, that is a way for more people to participate in the solar economy. So it's kind of interesting how the IRS is the linchpin for how cash moves from the federal government to us, and how challenging they make that to avoid things like fraud, which are actually not conducted by the people that these laws are hardest on.
I have nothing really to say on this question.
But a fun fact about the ITC is, you know who doesn't get direct pay? Certain B Corps, which is actually very interesting. So Cooperative Energy Futures in Minnesota, they weren't able to access the 30% direct pay. So they actually have PSEF being their tax equity partner, which is more ethical than, say, like Goldman Sachs. But it's kind of weird that this direct pay was meant to help small folks, but then like the medium folks kind of got forgotten. But yes, your question.
Oh, it actually, I could talk about direct pay, but I'm not going to. I am very interested in the recycling of the solar panels for a number of reasons. One is, you know, solar panels have a lifespan. And so is it, you know, how much capital do you need to add to rejuvenate them? Would be one question. And then also I'm really thinking about Buy America, you know, Build America, Buy America. Can you justify it being Build America if it, like, how much of recycling needs to happen for it to become Build America? Because that could add a lot of value to it, because so many of the, you know, the grants and the funding mechanisms are requiring that. And then also, like, who knows what's going to happen with tariffs. And so it could open up a really big area and also be really environmentally valuable, because so many of those compounds are, you know, they're being mined and they're, you know, heavy metals, and well, we know all sorts of problems with some of the components. So I'm just curious about your take on that.
I think heavy metals, keeping them out of the landfill is number one. I would say also, you're saying Work America. The panels are already here, so we're not dealing with a lot of tariffs. And the opportunity for working is actually teaching workforce development on how to put these panels down. I actually do a workforce development program through my nonprofit where we're teaching them how to put down Second Life Solar. So we're creating economic opportunities through these panels that are already here, that are not having to deal with tariffs. They weren't made here. We're trying to build a lot of manufacturing for solar, but that's honestly going to take 5-10 years. And I know they have rules that are saying solar panels coming out of different areas and even out of Washington have to be 100% dismantleable. That's great, but that's going to slow down every solar project that's not getting Second Life Solar. And the cost of acquiring solar panels is quite low, because there's this concept called orphan panels, where a lot of solar companies have warehouses full of maybe 300 panels. There's a company called Electra, and they do repurposing of solar panels. She has access to 20,000 solar panels that she just needs to find a place for now. So that's a workforce that goes out and takes maybe 30 panels, put them on a farmland, another 40 or 100 on another, and we're teaching people how to not just put down the panels, but how to maintain the systems, O&M, operation and management. And that's key to a longevity in a workforce, not just putting down the panels and walking away as a sale, but a relationship. So when that panel does have an issue, who goes out and fixes it, picks it up, takes it to the warehouse? That is all hyper-local economic generation through that workforce.
You actually gave a great segue into my question. So as more attention and money is going into this industry, what does certification for installers look like? And what are the education pathways or partnerships you're most excited or familiar with? And what is the current availability of labor in this space, right? So, and what does the timeline look like? So are we talking to high school seniors, you can do this in 2 years, or are we talking to college freshmen, you can do this in 6 months? What does that look like?
I guess I'll start out. So it's complicated. Number one, there is really no traditional pathway into solar. There are SEI, Solar Energy International, which you can go to a boot camp. That has a huge cost, but that still won't guarantee you a job. And the solar industry fluctuates with the sun. So a lot of people are coming in and out. I myself is going through an electrical program, even though I own a solar company, because I know for a lot of projects, we need an electrician on site for permission to operate and connect it. So right now there is a whole bunch of different unclear pathways. Even my program, I've been doing a green apprenticeship program for Port of Seattle, where I'm working with 18 and up through workforce programming. And part of the reason I had to start my company is because you train somebody and there's not an opportunity. So, and part of the reason I'm focused on what I'm focused on is because a lot of these projects, they're saying we're training them for a megawatt system. Yay! And then that system doesn't come. So now everybody has to leave and go to retail or all these other opportunities, and they're not actually working. So if we have solar panels that we can put down now, then we can activate workers. So that's my long-winded answer.
It's definitely something we're looking into. Like I said, we're going to spend a lot of money, and we want to make sure that we're driving it towards opportunities for workforce development. I think there are union pathways. Adam mentioned you got to be an electrician to install solar. So lots and lots of people are trying to get into the union track. So they are trying to enter pre-apprenticeship programs, then an apprenticeship program, then they're, getting licensed, and then they need actual work. And it's really competitive. And there are so many more people that want access to those spots than are available. There are some pre-apprenticeship programs that are trying to sort of help folks boost their resume so they're more attractive for this union pathway. So Emerald Cities Collaborative is one of those. They have a very new electrical pre-apprenticeship program. They also have one for the HVAC track, let's call it. King County's Jumpstart program is great. So they are partnering with local solar installers to have them sign on for, I think, 2 years, and they offer trainees a set number of training hours over those 2 years, and the county pays for that. So again, boosting the resumes, boosting the actual skills, so then they're more attractive candidates for those pre-apprenticeship and apprenticeship programs. The other thing that comes to mind is priority hire. That's a city law, applies to public works projects that are $5 million and greater, and worked with the unions to develop an agreement that sort of sets out the parameters around recruiting folks from priority zip codes. So offering women and people of color priority placement on big public works projects. But Adam's right, super complicated.
Yeah, as you were describing that, that gave me a flashback to my collaboration with King County and their heat pump program. But I think we were doing a lot of work around procurement. Like the public works procurement is hyper specific and quite arduous to get through, and so it can be difficult to cultivate some of those newer workers in the space. I think some of the minute language changes that can be beneficial over time is instead of scoring more highly because you're a longer established organization, maybe it's the number of jobs, or if you have like stellar references. Even though we want to do some priority hires, there's also some legal limitations around affirmative action style hiring. So there's like the Women Minority Business Enterprise certification that you can get for your business, WIMBY as the acronym, and that can kind of be identified in the procurement process as like who they're selecting for or providing more points to. But it can be really challenging because you can't always just dictate for some of these larger contracts exactly who you'd like to hire for fairness for everyone, but we all know that some of the best intended guidelines kind of reinforce certain biases or status quo. So yeah, workforce.
And yeah, the Jumpstart program's great. They actually put somebody with me at DC Power Plants. I really recommend it. And then, yeah, there's multiple different ways, but if anybody's trying to look, the best thing I say is find a project, ideally like a community project. I don't want to say like a garden project, where they can come on and help actually put hands on and learn and have experience. Because if you're going to interview, they're going to ask you, have you ever dealt with solar panels? And if your answer is no, then it's going to be hard.
Can you say what the Jumpstart program is?
The Jumpstart program is from King County, and they are placing individuals with solar and green businesses like mine, giving about 240 hours of their paying for that employee, so that they're getting work experience that my company can't afford to pay for an individual. So it's wonderful opportunity.
Hi. I don't want to go on too long because I have, a ton of things I could say. I guess I would like to say I would personally like to, stay in touch and like be involved with kind of the details of this program because it sounds really interesting. I am with the Seattle Community Network, and we do community-owned and operated internet access infrastructure, which feels kind of similar, but it's like very different in the details. But I think that like really the devil is in the details, like what you're saying with like the procurement and stuff. If it's difficult to just hire a workforce development program to try and like cut your costs and like make benefit for the trainees, maybe that's not so easy and things like that. So I think the details of the program design are going to be really important in like how empowering they are. And so I'm thinking about details like I think Amy had mentioned community ownership, like how hard that is on an equity sense. And there might be cases where, like, a bunch of low-income people living in an apartment, like they're renters, like, but they want to have a solar garden. Like, how do they do that? And, can other individuals, like they're close to their families, like help finance that? Or is that not allowed because they're like, not hyper local to the air, like to the building, or, things like that. So I think like hashing out all those details so people can actually contribute to making these projects a reality, like being creative, I think that will be really important.
Yeah, not to blow up his spot, but the person you want to email is Michael Carter, micarter@kingcounty.gov. I've emailed him too many times. Yeah.
He's the program manager for Jumpstart, the workforce development program. Yeah.
So are you going to share her contact?
Yes, absolutely.
Yes.
I think Mike will, right?
Yeah, I will do that. Yeah.
Okay, great.
Okay, I think. Oh, you okay?
Yeah, I'm super interested by a lot of the stuff that I heard. I'm curious to know a little bit more about like kind of. You said that a lot of panels get kind of thrown away while they're still like 90% effective. I'm curious, kind of like taking a step back. Is that like most panels that get discarded still have some life to them, or like kind of what's the proportion of panels that are still functional when they're thrown away? And yeah,
that is a very good question. and we would have to go into the landfill and capture them. But what we can say is, like your iPhone, your last iPhone probably got thrown away. It was still functional. We're seeing that it's an upgrade. It's not that the panels aren't working. It's that 10 years ago, we had that boom of solar panels and everybody was putting it on. And now, 10 to really about like 20 years later, we have panels that used to be 100 watts per panel, and now you have 500 watts. So what we're seeing is agrivoltaics or solar on roofs, instead of finding a new spot and putting down a whole new system, they just take off the panels, put new panels, and they've increased dramatically that system's output. But who's going to take those panels that are now 100 or maybe 200 watts? They just throw them away. $5 on average to throw them away. So that's what we're seeing, is that it's not necessarily that they are not good. It's just capitalism.
I guess I was going to ask, I was going to fill in some details about the U.S. source product or domestic product incentive. But, you know, like he was asking, you are building up relationships where you obviously have met a ton. So are you actively like on the lookout for like kind of throwing out a wide net in this area and getting like 10, 20 different guys who know you and will give you a call if we wind up ripping a system off a roof and it's 10 years old, but it's got 10 more years of life on it? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, cool.
And we'll be connecting you with Heather from Electra, and she has a platform that's doing that.
So Electra is continuously for you, basically being the middle person that, you know, we can parse our equipment out to.
Yeah, you can ask Mike. I don't always get back to my emails as fast as I should. So yeah, have those circular cooperative partners that help.
I mean, for some of the questions like what you were asking, it's like, most of there weren't very many panels like more than 10 years ago. And most of the panels we're pulling off that are 10 years old, it's because somebody could only power half their house with this much space. And now in that same amount of space, we can power the whole house. So, you know, it's an incentive for them. You know, it's so much to put it back on. The panels aren't that expensive now. Put them on. But what we're putting on now, it'll last 40, could last 50 years. But even those 10-year-old panels will last 20. For your question about the domestic stuff, I'm not an expert in this, but I've been copied on enough emails. So there's no solar cells made in the U.S. right now. We're about 2 years out. I can't remember if it's 3 or 5 plants. There's one in Moses Lake that's opening up because we got a polysilicon mine there. So we will be doing solar panels, but you can't make a true domestic solar panel right now. And when we look at our rails and stuff like that, you're probably in the same threads I am. It's like electricity, you know, we're talking about it here, is still a lot less expensive across the border in Canada. So that's why there's a lot of like that, all that aluminum hardware. It's like 1 month, okay, we can't do domestic product. And then it switches over and all of a sudden it's coming across the border. And that's why, you know, a lot of the tariff stuff's coming up on aluminum right now. It's because it is so much cheaper to do it up there. So, yeah, we want you to get your 10%.
So I'm kind of fuzzy on the details, but my understanding is that the Inflation Reduction Act had funding for solar. Is that still circulating?
It did. That was going to be wonderful. But I'll let someone else answer that.
Yeah, there were tax credit adders funded by the IRA. We'll have to see what the Republican tax package says about that. Solar for All is also an IRA-funded program. So Washington State's program is moving forward. They have a contract. They have access to some of the funds. I hear you in that a lot of Solar for All programs are frozen, but they are moving ahead cautiously. And they've already started some of the design work. I'm sure I'm leaving out a lot of stuff, too.
Yeah, it's just like a weird time because not exclusive to the Solar for All funds, there are other EPA funds that are no longer accessible, but that decision was made like illegally or just without announcement. So like, for example, the Communities Thriving Grant, which is facilitated by like a regional facilitator, They had like $60 million, $8 million in the first tranche and 52 in the other. The $8 million was rescinded illegally. And then they still had the 52 million, so they were still doing all of their operations, but then they just couldn't get into their account anymore. So it's really confusing what's even going on, because you can take them to court and they can just kick the ball around all day and just delay.
Okay, I have a question for each of you. I was wondering, on when you take old panels that are still can be used, are you actually, what you're doing, is that boosting the ability of those panels to, is it boosting them, or are you just aggregating them together and then continuing to use them?
Yeah, for the most part, we're just getting panels
Mm-hmm.
and just bringing them to the land and connecting them.
So they're going to be the same as they were before. They're
Yes.
just still useful.
We are working with a company out of Portland that has created a monitoring system for Second Life Solar to monitor the heat and energy output, so that we can make sure that the risk factor of a Second Life product is secure, but they're just, nothing's being done to advance them. We're just utilizing them as they were made.
I see. Okay. And then I had a question for you about the community solar. So where are you envisioning, because I imagine if a lot of people can connect in, who it's not attached to their house, that's quite a lot of scale. So where are you envisioning that these solar panels would be?
So we want to develop 4 megawatts across our service territory. So the projects will vary in size. Some might be smaller. Some might be much bigger, and intentionally so. So the bigger the project, the more customers we can allocate to that generation. 4 megawatts is about 1,400 customers. It's not that many. So unlike our first iteration, we're looking to match almost 100% of a customer's energy use to a portion of a community solar project. So that means less customers can be served. I hope we can develop more than 4 megawatts, but potential sites could be city-owned land that is underdeveloped, or the Port of Seattle has a lot of land, or it could be an entity like the White Setter Food Bank. They already have solar, but a community space, a church. There are actually several community solar projects in our service territory right now that have gone through that state program I mentioned. There's one on a church. There's one on a couple of other community-based buildings serving community. So it'll just depend. They won't be on single-family homes, though.
Okay. And I wanted to ask, so I didn't quite understand the group purchase kind of. Is that meaning that like one entity, like a land trust or something, owns it on behalf of a whole group? Or I wasn't sure.
Yes, I can re-explain the group purchase model. And the reason why it gets a little confusing is because it can be easily modified. And I always use this analogy of like, if you take apart a car and then reassemble it, is it the same car if you've replaced all the parts on the previous car? And I feel like the group purchase model is that way, because it's also now evolved to include energy efficiency products like heat pumps, which is the most recent thing I worked on. So the early group purchase model, like the first people in a Portland neighborhood, I believe, to do it, they were a group of neighbors, and it was maybe 10 homes, and they were just like, we all want solar, but it's so expensive right now. I wonder if all 10 of us went to an installer, they would give us a discount, because it's basically bulk buying. So the reason why Costco is cheaper than well, not a great analogy. I was gonna say the farmer's market, but just like buying in bulk, economies of scale, you can get cheaper prices. So that's what they did, and they got something like a 10% discount. It doesn't seem like that much, but on the scale of what it cost at the time, it's thousands of dollars. So the nonprofit that I worked at, Spark Northwest, was just helping facilitate more of those programs. And so that's kind of where you add in a new element and you change one part out of the car. So you have a nonprofit that gets grant funding to generate more interest in group purchase programs. So it expanded to Seattle neighborhoods. So there was like a Queen Anne campaign where my predecessor got a lot of people in Queen Anne interested in getting solar on their own homes. And then they went together and negotiated a discount with the installer to install solar on their own homes. And then as time evolves, more features kept changing, like let's actually pay for these solar installations, because if we keep doing it this way, the only people that we can work with are people who can afford solar. So if we want, you know, people of lower incomes or in different neighborhoods to get solar, then we actually have to subsidize it ourselves with more grant money, and then so on and so forth.
So that, in some ways, I mean, that's similar to a lot of co-ops are structured that way. They're kind of bulk buying.
Yeah, so you could run a group purchase campaign if
Yeah.
you just got like a group of homies together and wanted to go buy anything.
And then I just wanted to add, because it came up, and I think a lot of people don't know that a lot of rural areas are obviously affected by, you know, not having enough adequate utility service. But one thing that did happen historically is because the big companies were not really interested in rural areas, you know, they don't make much money off of that. There are actually a lot of rural utility co-ops in this country that I think people don't realize, a lot of them.
Yeah, and people are supposed to be much more active in those elections and things like that. And if we have some time, ask me about company towns and how co-op groceries were invented.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, yeah, that's exactly right. So anyway, that is a part of our landscape already. I don't think a lot of people know that, and those are huge opportunities to have those entities be a big part of solar and alternative energy projects.
Yeah.
So,
One strategy I didn't mention, because it's not that popular and I don't endorse it that much, is municipalization. So if you live in a PSC service area, for example, maybe a ton of you, or you could convince your government, like Bellevue, Kirkland, or wherever PSC works, to buy PSE, and then it gets transformed into a public utility. That is an option, but like I said, unpopular and doesn't always get you closer to your goals. But it is a thing if you want to look it up.
So anyway, we gotta wrap up here. So let's give it up for our presenters. So we were again Seattle Co-op Meet-up. So if you like this time, please come back, and before you leave, please talk to each other. Talk to at least like 3 new faces that you never talked to in your life, and exchange your LinkedIn or whatever. So please make some connection before you go. Thank you so much.